Welcome to another Casual Clicks Tactics. Still going on with Mutant Madness. Here we got Prime Bishop number 003B and Professor X from the same set, the House of X set number 42, the rare. We're going to take a look at combining Bishop with a couple of variety of X-Men, starting first with Professor X. I actually like this combination because Bishop here has a trait called Time Traveling with My Sister. Phasing Teleport. Once per game, when Bishop uses it, after resolutions you may generate a Shard Bystander. The Shard Bystander has running shot with 8 speed, 10 attack with precision strike, 17 toughness, and 3 damage. What's actually interesting about Shard is her trait, the Absorb the Ambient Light. Opposing characters can only attack characters within 5 squares of themselves. That means that you are actually putting the opponent at a huge disadvantage when they're only able to attack anyone within 5 squares of themselves, especially if they're playing figures that have higher than 5 range. You want to force them to get in close because of this trait. So here is a particular reason why I like this combo. We're going to say that this is the Shard Bystander right there. Opposing characters can only attack if they're within 5 squares. So let's say one right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is Mesmero's 7 range. He has 7 range. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So from there, he's not able to make the attack because of Shard. We have to get within 5 squares. So what that forces Mesmero to do, of course, is have to get closer. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now that he's able to successfully make attacks, of course, we still have to watch out for the hindering terrain. You can't make an attack from here because obviously he's on a different edge of elevated terrain as opposed to over here. And I'm actually using this particular example because just to show why I like teaming up Professor X with Bishop. Because you can actually create scenarios like this where you bunch yourself into somewhat of an awkward position and not really care so much about the terrain that's in the way because of Professor X's special power. It's the one that says, while you slept, the world changed. Mind control, stealth. When Professor X uses mind control, he has improved targeting, ignores elevated terrain, hindering terrain, other characters, and can make range attacks even though he's adjacent to other opposing characters. So he doesn't really care too much about this particular terrain. He can still draw a line of fire from there, making it even more difficult for characters that don't have that kind of improved targeting to try to make that particular attack. That forces them to either move closer and waste another action instead of making an attack, or just not being able to make the attack in general because they're too far. He needs to waste another action to get to you. And Professor X has a huge range of 8 squares, making it even more difficult, because let's say as soon as you get within the 8 square range, Professor X can now all of a sudden target you because he cares very little about hindering terrain or elevated terrain. So, you can hit other characters, you can hit opposing characters with mind control, make them walk back, make it even more difficult for them to still continue to advance because of mind control. It's just a way to, I guess, kind of mess with the placement of your opposing figures. You can actually even also go the opposite way and use someone like Wolverine, for example. I'm going to place Wolverine right here. This Wolverine is number 004 from the House of X, the common one. And now I'm picking this one, or I'm giving this one as an example because, again, we have to get, the opposing figures have to get within 5 squares, right? So that's right there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Again, of course, you still have to pay attention to elevated terrain, which means that he has to get closer. And this will allow now someone like Wolverine, who has no range and relies on on melee combat, close combat, to have to try to get to Mesmero, which, the enemy or the opposing figures and your opponents actually is already doing that on their own by having to walk up and close the distance between the 5 squares or the 8 squares that Professor X can reach towards. And once they're finally within the 5 squares, guess what? Now they're in striking distance to someone like Wolverine, who this particular one has charge and flurry with 11 attack and 3 damage. Let's see. So he can go up to 5 squares. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's stairs right there. And see, so he can still reach and make the attack. And now all of a sudden, you've kind of sprung a trap because, again, they have to close the gap. Otherwise, Professor X is just going to keep hitting them from that 8 range. They have to get within 5 squares because of Bishop's Shard's trait. And if once they do, you got that sneak attack ready to go with Wolverine or someone similar. It doesn't have to be that particular Wolverine. Maybe you have a different, more efficient figure that you'd like to use. The point is the same, though. Try to have someone that can hit farther than 5 squares, like Professor X. He has a long 8 range. And then try to have someone waiting for them that can deal a lot of close combat damage, like Wolverine or someone similar. And this also makes for a good Krakoan revival team because Professor X, of course, being 75 points, and these 2 characters are less points than Professor X. So that you can also work something in there where you can build a little squad with Professor X being the highest point costing character to allow him to revive anyone if they were to get KO'd with the Krakoan revival trait. I hope you like that combination. Feel free to try it out for yourself. I like it. It seems to be working very well. Still going on with Mutant Madness. We're going to take a look at Mesmero here and how he works with the Brotherhood. Mesmero has a special power on his defense. That's the one we're going to be focusing on. That says, "You there, protect me," which gives him Mastermind. And when Mesmero uses Mastermind during a range attack, he may instead choose an opposing character within 4 squares and line of fire that isn't attacking regardless of point value. Okay, it's a lot to take in. And let's break that down little by little. First, he has Mastermind. Looking at that, you'll notice that Blob has a defensive power that's called "Is That the Best You Got, Pipsqueak?" Blob takes a maximum of 1 damage from attacks. Blob can only be chosen for Mastermind by characters that he shares a keyword with, protected, outwit, pulse wave. So this power cannot be outwitted, can't be pulse waved. Takes a maximum of 1 damage from attacks, and it only works with characters that he shares a keyword with. Well, guess what? They're both Brotherhood of Mutants. That means that Mesmero would be able to successfully transfer that damage to Blob, and guess what? Blob only takes a maximum of 1 damage during attack. So that means that any attack that gets made towards him, of course, can be then transferred thanks to Mastermind over here to Blob, and Blob will only take a maximum of 1 damage. That means, essentially, let's take a look at how many clicks Blob has here. 5 clicks, so that means that he can essentially take up to 5 attacks. And then assuming, of course, Blob doesn't manage to heal himself somehow, if he were able to get an attack through the trait My Mutant Brothers and Sisters, which says once per turn, when an effect other than clearing removes an action token from Blob, after resolutions, heal him 1 click. And if you want to keep building and keep expanding on this combo, it's pretty simple, because obviously you want to focus here on Blob, on getting him healthy, right? With that My Mutant Brothers and Sisters trait. You've got a few options scattered throughout the Brotherhood. These are some of my favorite ones to use with Blob because they both have leadership. So if they manage to get that leadership role and they're adjacent to Blob, they can take a token off of him and activate that My Mutant Brothers and Sisters and essentially give him another attack that can get transferred to him from Mesmero. Between these two, though, between Mystique and Magneto, I like Mystique personally with Blob because she is a little more close combat oriented. So if she needs to stay close to Blob, she's going to get into the thick of things like Blob probably will. Blob will probably have to, right? Because if there were ever a situation where they were start getting into close combat, you don't want Mesmero being tied up by one character. You want to take advantage of the fact that he has 2 targets. So you always want to watch out for that and make sure that you use Blob to protect Mesmero as well. So Mesmero can keep trying to use that mind control of his. And then, like I mentioned, try to have Mystique somewhere adjacent so she can take those tokens off of Blob and potentially heal him. You know, this works as well with Mesmero, of course, because he also has that trait. Just, you know, trying to expand on that combination of Blob and Mesmero here a little bit with Mystique. Let's take a look at the next combination of characters for Mutant Madness. What do we got here? Yes, the Juggernaut. We're going to take a look at not the Juggernaut from House of X. We've already taken a look at him. He's already been a guest on Casual Clicks Tactics. We're actually going to take a look at this Juggernaut right here from Wolverine. I'm sorry, from the X-Men, the animated series set. Particular the power, the one that says City-wide Rampage. If Juggernaut destroyed 3 or more pieces of blocking terrain during one of his actions, after resolutions, remove an action token from him. As you can see, this map has no blocking terrain. It's part of the reason why I'm talking about Juggernaut is that, unfortunately, you can't always pick the map that you want. Sometimes your opponent wins the die roll, and they're going to get to pick a map that may not have any blocking terrain. Well, that's still not a problem because the Brotherhood has some team members that can make some pretty solid barriers here in Avalanche and Pyro. Both, of course, have their uses. Particular Avalanche, he has a shorter range where Pyro has a longer range. So I'm going to do this to kind of illustrate the difference between these two right there. That Avalanche has to get in slightly closer with his 4 range, and Pyro can kind of hang back with his 6 range. Pyro has this trait. And this is why I'm saying that I think that they have very useful barriers, because they're not just creating barriers. They're activating a special power. Pyro, for example, has one that says too hot to handle. Energy Explosion, Poison. When Pyro uses Energy Explosion, you may choose that he has 3 targets, or after resolutions, he can use Barrier at no cost. That means we can set up a scenario like this. Let me back them up a little bit. Here we got Juggernaut engaged in combat with Karima. Pyro can then attack Karima with Energy Explosion because, you know, Karima has damage reducer. She's not going to take any. She's not going to take any damage. You still have to use Energy Explosion to try to activate it, and sometimes, you know, they may have a character that's adjacent to them that would be able to take 1 damage. In this case, Wolverine here. If you target, of course, Karima with Energy Explosion, anyone adjacent to Karima will also take 2 damage, which is Wolverine. And she has toughness, so she'll still take 1 damage, right? That's why I like pairing him with Juggernaut, because Juggernaut has a lot of damage reducers. You know, just kind of going through his dial. It doesn't have toughness at all. He has Invincible, Impervious, Invulnerability, all of which can negate the Energy Explosion, so he doesn't really care how hot Pyro makes it get. The point is, Pyro needs to use that Energy Explosion to help his Brotherhood out. And this is what I mean. So right now, in reality, the placement of this barrier is not optimal. That's not really the point I'm trying to illustrate here. What I'm trying to say is that we want to help Juggernaut because, like I mentioned, you may not always get a map that has blocking terrain. In this case, you want to make that for him because Juggernaut doesn't care if it's printed blocking terrain or not. His trait says if Juggernaut destroyed 3 or more pieces of blocking terrain during one of his actions, after resolutions, remove an action token from him. And this all, of course, is just to kind of try to start a chain, right? What I'm trying to say is this. So Juggernaut, let's say he starts at his 200 point line on click number 6. Already has a token on him from his previous attack. There's his token from the last turn. And he's already taken some damage because Karima here has Precision Strike. Wolverine has Blades. They managed to crack his armor slightly. So he's slightly lower down the dial on click number 11, right? And you want to, of course, keep someone huge, your tank like Juggernaut, nice and healed up. as much as possible so he can keep absorbing that damage. And this is, like I had mentioned, where Pyro comes into play, making that energy explosion attack, creating a barrier. And now guess what? Juggernaut here has improved movement, ignores character. So he's never going to be tied down by anyone, and he can move freely. And of course, he also has destroys blocking terrain as he moves through it. And guess what? We're going to destroy Pyro's blocking terrain to 3. As long as he destroys these 3. And then he's going to come back for 5 to make that charge. And he already destroyed these 3 pieces of blocking terrain. And that, what does that mean? That means that after resolutions, remove an action token from him, which will trigger the My Mutants brothers and sisters. So it's kind of like you're healing him for 1, right? So we'll play it out, make the attack roll. Let's say he hit. I hit Karima for 2 because she's got invulnerability, and Juggernaut does 4 damage. So now I'm going to place the second action token on Juggernaut because I still have to. And then it says, after resolutions, if he destroyed 3 or more pieces of blocking terrain, remove an action token from him. And that's when I would remove it and then heal him of 1, because now I've triggered the My Mutants brothers and sisters trait. And I brought Avalanche here because Avalanche has barrier too. I like pairing him with Juggernaut because, like I said, he does have a shorter range, so he has to get closer to Juggernaut. It does make it a little more dangerous because obviously now he's in the thick of things too. And he has the special power Split the Earth, Quake. When Avalanche uses it, you may choose that he has Giant Reach 4, or after resolutions, he can use Barrier at no cost. So you see, Pyro activates it with Energy Explosion, whereas Avalanche here activates it with Quake. 2 different uses, but very helpful in getting some, I guess, a very easy way to get Juggernaut healed. And so that way you don't have to worry too much about map choice with Juggernaut and not having that blocking terrain with you. Taking it a step further, going here with Amelia Voigt. I like pairing her with characters like Juggernaut. If I'm going to set Juggernaut like at his 200 point level in a 300 point game, or other characters like maybe Exodus, those characters that you maybe want to pay a little more points for, because they have those alternate starting dials where you can start someone like Exodus at 175 points. I like to pair him with Amelia Voigt, and here is why. So I'm going to stick with the example Juggernaut here, just so there's more space and for me to show you why I like to pair Amelia Voigt with Juggernaut. With that trait, Mutant Messiah, that's the one we're going to be looking at. It says at the beginning of the game, for all characters with this trait, choose a friendly character with the Acolytes or Brotherhood of Mutants or X-Men keyword. Juggernaut has the Brotherhood of Mutants keyword, so that means that he's an eligible target. And it says that character can use Mastermind, but only to choose characters with this trait. So any damage now can be transferred successfully to Amelia Voigt should Juggernaut start taking some damage, because Amelia Voigt's trait grants him Mastermind. Now, what makes this combination particularly tougher is the fact that Amelia Voigt has this special power on her defense, which is Transmute Out of Danger, that gives her super senses. And once per turn, when Amelia Voigt or an adjacent friendly character will take 3 or more damage, you may give that character 2 action tokens to take 1 unavoidable damage instead. If you do, after resolutions, you may place that character in a square adjacent to her current square. So the adjacent friendly character in this case is Juggernaut. This says if he would take 3 or more damage, which, they would have to do quite a bit of damage because he has impervious and vulnerability. But let's say they do manage to somehow hit him for 6 damage. He can only still prevent 2 with invulnerability or impervious, meaning that he'll take 4. But with Amelia Voigt adjacent to him, instead of, taking that 3 damage, you just give that character 2 action tokens to take 1 unavoidable damage instead. And if you do, after resolutions, you may place that character in a square adjacent to her current square. And this is adjacent to her current square is right there. It's kind of a way to also pull back in case you're getting swarmed and you need a little more space to breathe. Catch up, maybe knock a few walls down to try to heal yourself back up. And of course, Amelia Voigt here because she now has Mastermind. If they were to attack Juggernaut, she can mastermind. Juggernaut can mastermind the damage to Amelia Voigt, and I think she has a great dial for Mastermind because of that regeneration and support at the end of her dial. I mean, if you can control the amount of damage that you do to her, whether it's 4 or 5 damage, she'll land on that phasing, teleport, regeneration, support click. Where of course you can't use support if the target that you want to support is adjacent to enemy characters. But that's where that whole transmute thing would actually come into handy again, where if that were to happen and Juggernaut were to take damage, you can do that trick where, you give him the 2 tokens, he takes the 1 damage, you place him in a square adjacent to her square, and now she's free to use support on Juggernaut without having to worry about him being adjacent to enemy characters. And then after transferring damage to her with that regen, if you don't really need to use support and she's got regeneration, she can just heal herself back up and offer to be able to transfer more damage from Juggernaut to Amelia Voigt, or whoever you choose to pair Amelia Voigt with. But that's one of my particular favorites. But my actual favorite from the Brotherhood is this one here that I actually like to pair with Amelia Voigt. Let's get these out of the way really quick here. Thank you guys for helping me illustrate the barriers and Juggernaut and all the cool things that you can do with him. This one right here, this beast, Shadow King, I like to pair him up with Amelia Voigt because he's colossal. That means he can carry Amelia Voigt around, same as Juggernaut. Juggernaut's a giant, so he can also carry someone smaller. Of course, Amelia Voigt is standard size. I like this combination because, Shadow King to begin with is brutal with his 8 range, 3 targets, and that can't be targeted by opposing characters 5 or more squares away. So they have to get in close to try to get to him. He's got an 8 range. He can phase out of the way, and he's got that special power with Mind Control, Phasing, Teleport. Once per turn, when Shadow King uses either after resolutions, he may use the other one at no cost. If he were to be moving around, again, he's colossal. So whenever he uses that phasing teleport power, and he uses one, he can use the other. He can then start using Mind Control to start targeting enemy characters. We'll put Karima back on there. So that way we can illustrate. Now he can target her with Mind Control. Or Psychic Blast, whatever power he happens to have. Well, actually, he wouldn't be able to do the Psychic Blast if he uses phasing. It has to be Mind Control because it's you belong to the Shadow King now. Mind Control, Phasing, Teleport. Once per turn, when Shadow King uses either, after resolutions, he may use the other one at no cost. So that's how you're going to be able to get around. And since he can phase, since he's colossal, he can carry Amelia Voigt around with him. So if he were to ever take some damage, you can again start doing that transmute trick where you try to save Shadow King from a big blow, or just transfer the damage to Amelia Voigt so she can get down to her support and regeneration clicks to heal Shadow King if Shadow King needs to be healed back up. And speaking of Shadow King and his that special power, the trait, by the way, which the one that says, behind the scenes, Shadow King can't be targeted by opposing characters 5 or more squares away. If you're playing a big point game, doesn't even have to be a big point game because Shadow King has a 150 point starting line, which you can use in a 300 point constructed game, and Exodus here has a 75 point starting line that you can use as well. A total of 225 points with Emilia here is 45 points, so that'll add up to 270. You can throw in a guard command, those 25 points. Those remaining 25 points you have, you can use a guard command, which not the best character to use. However, he is very useful in placing probability control tokens for theme team probability controls. He's not a bad character to do that, and of course maybe to tie someone up who's being a nuisance and let your guys hit from a range because he has 8 range. Exodus here has 7 range with 2 targets. Now I'm saying to pair Shadow King with Exodus because of Exodus's Genosian Force Field trait that says at the beginning of the game choose 2, 4, 6, or 8 to be X. I'm going to choose 2. Okay, just for this example, I'm going to choose 2. It says when a character more than x squares, which is 2 squares away, would move within 2 squares of Exodus and wasn't given a move action, that character stops moving. So that will prevent stuff like charge. If you want to get like close to Exodus to charge, to hit him with charge, as soon as they move within 2 squares of him, they have to stop unless they were given a move action. So that when you use something like charge, it's a power action. And of course, as soon as you enter that 2 square zone that I chose, they have to stop unless they were given a move action. If they were given a move action, it's rare that they have a special power or something that'll let them make that attack. That means that Exodus has 1 turn to respond to what's going on. But that's not even all. A character more than x squares away attacks 1 or more characters within x squares of Exodus. Modify their attack -1. Okay, so we're going to place Karima back on here because she's got range. She is 1, 2, 3, 4 squares away. And the power says, character more than 2 squares, because I chose 2, more than 2 squares away attacks 1 or more characters within 2 squares of Exodus. Modify attack -1. So if Karima were to attack Shadow King, who is within 2 squares of Exodus, she'll get -1. Karima's right there. Sorry, she's being blocked by Shadow King's ginormous sword. I'll move her a little over here. There we go. So now she's going to get -1 attack. So she'll still get to make the attack. But I mean, hey, -1 is nothing to, to scoff at, especially considering, like I said, that you got to get within 5 squares to even consider making the attack. And remember, use their range to your advantage. The fact that Shadow King has an 8 range and Exodus has a 7 range, if the enemy starts closing in on you, just spend that turn to, break away, make some distance, put some distance between you and your opponent. And really make sure you use those 2 traits together, the behind the scenes and the Genosian force field in tandem. And Amelia Voigt, of course, to try to help keep, in this particular combination, I would choose Shadow King. But like I mentioned, Amelia Voigt works well with any one of these bigger characters, Juggernaut, Magneto, Shadow King, Exodus. Take your pick. Amelia Voigt works great with them all. We're going to go on to the last combination here for Mutant Madness. And again, just being able to ignore terrain. I talked about it a little earlier, featuring Professor X and his cool special power that allows him to target through elevated terrain, hindering terrain, other stuff that I am finding here. Right here, characters, and can make attacks even though he's adjacent to other characters. Just using the terrain tactically to your advantage, we're going to also add Karima to pair up with Professor X. Why this particular combination? Well, because Karima has improved targeting, ignores characters, hindering terrain, and elevated terrain, same as Professor X. But she does it with her regular attacks. That means that she can still get her attacks in to opposing characters. I'm going to put Pyro back over here. So, they can make these kind of awkward attacks through what would normally be impossible shots, but they don't care. They have that improved targeting. Use the terrain to your advantage. If you win that map roll, choose maps with a lot of elevated terrain, hindering terrain, because your characters obviously don't care about that. And you want to try to keep that distance. Like I had mentioned, use them in tandem with Bishop. So now you got the opponent being limited to a 5 range, so they have to be closer. They also have to deal with the terrain. It's just kind of a pain to deal with. Once you start pairing these figures who can ignore all sorts of terrain, that's when you kind of have to start thinking, what maps work well with these characters. So you have to kind of start thinking outside of the team instead of just being so narrow and focusing on what you can do with the characters that you have on the map currently. That's about it for House of X Mutant Madness. Of course, it's not really the end of Mutant Madness. There's plenty more mutants that we're going to take a look at much later. For now, these are some of the combinations that I've found just kind of fun playing around with the House of X sets. If there's maybe a particular favorite combination that you like, please feel free to leave that in the comments below. Share that with the community, share that with my subscribers. And don't forget to like and subscribe as well. That way you're notified when the next Casual Click Tactics goes live. As always, thank you so much for watching.